Start a very short words of introduction with a story for you. And I want to tell you the story of Maria Antonietta. Maria Antonietta is Peruvian. I met her 10 years ago. She was the widow of a Peruvian man. She was the mother of 3 Peruvian sons who had been killed by the Shining Light, this terrorist movement that destroyed so much of Peru. She probably had about 2 teeth left in her mouth. She didn't know how to read. And her living was about farming guinea pigs that she would then take to the market to get some money and then to be able to buy enough for her living. For many, many years, after men in her family had been killed, she was robbed, she was under violence, because of course people wanted to steal the cash that she was getting for the selling of the guinea pigs. When you see her on that photo with me, and she held my hand for about 3 hours that day, she showed me inside her skirt a little pocket that she had. And she explained to me that despite the fact that she couldn't read, that saved her life and helped her keep her money. What was that? It was a card that she could put into a cell phone. And that access to, not literacy yet, but access to means of payments that would protect her from domestic violence, and the fact that she could actually count and know where she was putting the money and where she was transferring it to earn some interest, actually made her a different person. And she was proud and confident. And for me, that epitomizes what can be achieved when there is a will and when there is a way to actually help those that are in trouble because they don't have access to finance or because they don't understand finance. She didn't know how to read, but she understood finance better than many other people. So this is Maria Antonietta for us. Now, of course, this is not the point of this beautiful time that we're going to spend together. So, equality in the world is under threat in the most unexpected corners. And advocating for women's access to literacy is also about fighting for equality. So that's what we are going to try to demonstrate this morning. And there's a fantastic panel of speakers whom you know very well. And I will try for myself to tell you how much it actually relates to what the central bank does. Because some of you might think, well, what has the central bank got to do with women's literacy and equal access to information and understanding and education? Well, it has a lot to do with it, actually. It has a lot to do in 2 respects. And I'm going to mention a few numbers which I'm sure an excellent professor who's sitting to my left will comment upon. But according to one of our great surveys, the ECB Consumer Expectations Survey that we started back in 2020, if you remember, women today account for 60% of those Europeans who lack basic financial literacy, which highlight a gender gap of 20 percentage points. Other surveys indicate that women are 7 percentage points less likely to set aside enough money to cope with emergency. So that means what? That women live longer, that women live poorer, and that women, like all those who lack financial literacy, are not capable of saving for the case of emergency. I'm sure you will be commenting on that later on. So it matters for central bank because what we are trying to achieve is improve productivity. That is more for the whole financial community, not specifically for central bank, but we have a keen interest in that because it can improve competitiveness and it matters for inflation. But our job is also price stability. And we know from the study, and I will leave my other companions on the panel to demonstrate it, but we know that for price stability to be achieved, people need to appreciate what is inflation, for instance, and they can better have inflation expectations, which otherwise could not be either measured or that they could not assess if they don't understand what it is that we are talking about. So this financial literacy of women is a direct link to the capacity to expect inflation, to understand inflation, And for us, it is critically important because we rely on these inflation expectations and we rely on them remaining anchored, as I think we have achieved reasonably well in the last few years. So that's on the expectations front and on the price stability. On the productivity, clearly what we know is that we need more investment being made in not a deposit account, not just a saving accounts, but in financial instruments that will eventually be used to finance investment in Europe. You all have heard about the Commission proposal and the agreement of the European Council to finance massively defense. You rearm Europe, that's one thing. The German authorities have announced some decisions that will have to do also with investment. Well, if we have half of the population at a large disadvantage when it comes to understanding financial instruments, we are short of an access to savings that is otherwise half sleeping in a saving or deposit account. And for them to invest in those instruments that will be deployed to finance in defense, in infrastructure, in those key reforms that will improve our productivity, then we are at a disadvantage. Hence, the reason why central banks have a definite interest in making sure that financial literacy at large, but particularly financial literacy of women, given that they are at a disadvantage, actually improves over the course of time. It will help us doing a better job, and it will be helpful not just for the cause of equality, which is a moral imperative anyway, but also for our economies. So I have the great honor and pleasure to they will be talking about all that in a much more informed way than me, because some of them monitor and spare some of those programs. And there is one person who actually was introduced to me by a colleague and friend as the queen of financial literacy. So this is Professor Annamaria Lusardi, professor at Stanford University and a renowned expert in financial literacy. The queen, as I've heard. But we also have the great pleasure of Joachim Nagel, president of the Deutsche Bundesbank, Claudia Buch, chair of the supervisory board of the ECB, Fabio Panetta, governor of the Banca d'Italia, and Klaas Knot, president of the Netherlands Bank, all of them committed to what I have just introduced briefly. So I will start with you, Professor, because there's nothing like a good academic start to get the debate going. So can you just focus on those key elements that your research has produced for the benefit of all? And I know that both our consumer survey and the Netherlands banks have been good sources of information for you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. When you start working on financial literacy, you cannot stop working on that and work on anything else. And apparently you even get a royal title, maybe if you do so. But this is because financial literacy is about the future. It's about the decision and the skills we need to make in our fast changing world. And that's why it's so important. And the reason why the meeting is so important today is that the research over the past 20 years has shown that the gender difference in financial literacy is pervasive and stubborn. But there is also more in the gender difference than just difference in knowledge. And that's why also the data is important to look at. What is striking in all of the studies we have done is indeed that gender difference are present everywhere, in every country, in every time period. We even did a global survey covering 140 countries and more, including Peru, and we see, of course, a gender difference in every country around the world. And it is pervasive. It is present among the young, and is present among the old, is present among the married, the uneducated, and the educated one. And I want to show this graph here to show that, unfortunately, we also see it in Europe. This is the data from the Consumer Expectation Survey, the most recent data. It covers 11 countries in Europe. And as you can see, not just is it present in every country, but in every age group, in every education group, in every income group. And thank you, President Lagarde, for this data, because it really allows us to be a lot more precise, to understand a lot more about what we can do. And let me also thank the research team here for working together on this analysis. How can we explain this finding? Why is it financial literacy everywhere? When we study, and in particular we look across country, that's the important part, we also notice another permanent feature, which is that women were disproportionately more likely to respond to the financial literacy question, and we have designed very simple question to measure financial knowledge. We are testing the ABC of financial literacy, but women disproportionately say, I do not know. This is an important finding because when we actually drill down, and this time using Dutch household data, so thank you also for providing all this very useful source of information, we found that we asked the question as we normally ask, and then 6 weeks later, we took away the I do not know options. What we discover is that women know more than they think they know, but unfortunately, they are not confident in their answer. So the gender gap shrinks a little bit. It can explain 1/3 of the gender difference in financial literacy, but we also found that women say, I'm not confident in my knowledge. And that matters because, for example, that lack of confidence is a detriment for women to invest in financial market, to invest in the stock markets. When women are faced with complex financial decisions like this one, they shy away. And this is a detriment for everybody. Let me also show that financial literacy affects more than the lives of women. In this next graph, I'm actually going to talk about the ECB credibility and financial literacy. I know also, and I hope you expect that when you invite an academic, they are going to show you a lot of slides. I have many of them, but here actually what I really want to do is actually show just how important financial literacy is. As the ECB is increasing the interest rate to guarantee price stability, when we ask the respondent in the consumer expectation survey, do you think that the ECB, how likely it is to achieve price stability? We see this divergent. Is the women with the high financial literacy that think that the ECB is doing the policy to achieve price stability, instead the low financial literacy actually even perceive the credibility of the central bank much less. What am I saying? Why is this important? Is because the implications of financial literacy are far-reaching. They go beyond the lives of women. They also affect monetary policy. They also affect society. And this is why it's so important to change the statistics. It is not mission impossible. All of us have a role to play, to do so. Media, central banks, and the media, and academics as well. Because the question that we have at stake here, which future do we want to build?
Terrific. So that's a perfect segue into what you can tell us, President Nagel. You have programs in place, you act, and you are going to tell us where you think you can move the needle.
So thank you very much for having this opportunity to talk to this very important topic. Let me start by mentioning, I learned it this morning when I checked the news, that today is Equal Pay Day. And Equal Pay Day, I know the German data, it is still the case that women are earning 16% less compared to men. So this is, and I guess some of this is alluded to the fact that you already give us here in your presentation, that financial literacy is an important factor behind that. So the Bundesbank, my institution, it's not our primary task to do a lot of work on financial literacy, but we are doing this. And over the past couple of decades, we talk to teachers, we talk to students, we talk to school kids. I guess it's important to give a good understanding what we are doing and what central banks are doing, and we are doing surveys. And the survey we did last year was related to what you did. We asked also women and men questions regarding financial literacy. And the outcome is, it's pretty much the same. So 55% of women answered the questions correctly, compared to 60.
Oh, it was like a quiz.
Yeah, it was like a quiz. And 68% of men. So there is this gender gap, and we have to work on closing this gender gap. This is an important factor, and I already said this, that I guess this is not a 100-meter run. It is more like a marathon. So we have to work constantly on improving, helping that this gap could be closed. And Christine, you said it in your introductory statement. I think it's all about our mandate, achieving price stability at the end. If you have a better financial literacy background, then you understand what central banks are doing. This is a matter of trust, and it helps us to fulfill our mandate. So for us, it is an important task, and that's the reason why I'm really, really happy to be here today.
Well, fantastic. My dear Claudia, does it matter for supervision after all?
It does.
It does.
It does.
Tell us why.
That's the short answer. But before I give my answer, let me thank Annamaria and her team really for the work they've done, and in terms of really making financial literacy not only a topic for researchers, but also doing policy outreach. And I think nobody will ever have the answer, but maybe a little bit the work you've done has also supported us as supervisors in keeping banks sound and stable. So why am I saying this? Well, because we basically, I mean, what is our mandate? It's also not directly financial literacy, it's not consumer protection, but our mandate is to keep banks sound and stable in the interest of depositors and also people who borrow from the banks. And of course, the better people understand the economics of borrowing, lending, the better their financial knowledge, the easier it is also for us to keep the bank stable, so that investment decisions that are being made are sound. So this is why it's immediately important that there's a high degree of financial literacy in the population. That's immediately important for supervisors. And as I said, I guess nobody will ever have the sound scientific answer to that, but maybe the work you've done, Annamaria, with your team, it's not just her, but it's a big team behind it, has helped us a little bit also to increase the level of financial literacy. But we're certainly not there yet. And when I say financial literacy is important for supervisors, a high degree of financial knowledge, I mean this, of course, in the narrow sense. Do people understand compound interest? Do they understand inflation? Do they understand the benefits of diversification? But I also mean it in a little bit broader perspective, in the sense that financial literacy, financial knowledge is also about sound financial decision making. So taking decisions which are sustainable in the medium to long term. And again, this is something we pay very close attention to. We don't work directly, of course, with the customers of the banks, but within the banks, we want to see sound long-term financial decision making. So I think this is another aspect of financial literacy and sound decision making that is really important for supervisors. Now, the second point I want to make is, why are we talking about this around Women's Day? Because this is a general issue. It's men and women very often that don't have a sound financial knowledge, but we see the persistent gap in terms of financial literacy as has been mentioned for women in particular, and it's a very persistent pattern. And we also see a gender gap when it comes to the management and the decision makers within the banks. And here again, apologies that I don't have kind of causal evidence whether these two things are being linked, but maybe there's similar factors underlying this, so that women maybe, and as Annamaria has explained, they tend to cross the I don't know. Maybe they also think a little bit, well, a job in finance is not for me, it's for the others. So I think it would be interesting to explore whether the gender gap that we see in financial literacy, in banks, in finance, whether that is somehow related. And I think that would be really important to also address the underlying causes, so that we have less of a gender gap, and also, of course, better, sounder financial decision making everywhere. And then, of course, the question we have to ask ourselves is, what can we do? And I'm sure we come back to this in the panel. I have a few ideas what we can do, but maybe we leave this for later.
Okay, so I'll come back to you for the what can we do?
Yes.
That's a brilliant one. I want to go to you, Fabio, with what you actually do, because Banca d'Italia has taken this matter seriously a long time ago for good reasons, and it's extremely convincing. So please.
Thank you, President. And let me start by thanking you for inviting me to discuss this highly relevant topic. And you are absolutely right. Banca d'Italia started working on financial education, financial literacy 10 years ago. And over time, we have launched several projects. We realized that in Italy, we have a significant gender gap. But let me say one thing, because it is important to recognize the gender gap, but then it is even more important to try and understand why you have a gender gap. And Professor Lusardi mentioned that the underconfidence of women is one of the key determinants of the gender gap in financial education. But we have nice results that may shed light on why we get this gender gap. In Italy, the gender gap is relatively persistent over time. We still find a significant gender gap among the young population. We test 15-year-old boys and girls, and we find a significant gender gap. When instead we test the older population, we find the gender gap only for the unemployed women. Employed women have an understanding of financial matters that is, by and large, comparable to that of men. This suggests that the gap in financial literacy is the symptom of a broader problem that is the employment status of women. When women are employed, they get their own remuneration. They have their own bank account. They have to become involved with financial matters almost necessarily. So they avoid that they win the underconfidence, and then the gap becomes much narrower. So this is an interesting result that we find. It's not financial literacy per se, it's a broader issue that involves the condition of women in the labor market. We have launched several programs, and we have designed those programs based on 3 pillars. First, we try to design the programs based on evidence. We run surveys, we do empirical research, we rely on research by other central banks, Dutch central bank, others, to try to understand which are the weak groups of the population that deserve our attention. Women, the unemployed, the elderly, immigrants. And we try to design very targeted programs because the treatment that you must give to different groups differs. And third, we have a careful ex post performance assessment of each of these programs so that this helps us to improve the design of the projects. We reach the population in several ways. One that is probably the most effective one is the joint venture, let me call it this way, between the Bank of Italy and the Italian public TV channels. We participate in TV programs with RAI, and we target hours in which you can reach the weaker groups of the population in terms of financial literacy, early morning and afternoon. And we introduce the issue as not in a professorial lecture, but as a conversation between our employees, those who are in charge of financial education at the bank, and the presenter of the TV program. And we introduce basic financial education concepts with examples. So what is a consumer supposed to understand when he has to ask for a mortgage at his or her bank? What should they take into account when they go to the bank to discuss the conditions that they get on their bank account? How should they plan their future in financial terms? How should they build the pension for their old age? So very simple concepts and with examples. We, in 2024, this way, we reached 7 million Italians, so 15% of the population.
Yeah.
And the randomized analysis of the ex post effect of these programs indicates that there has been an improvement in terms of financial literacy on a scale from 1 to 100. 1, you really have a poor understanding of financial matters. 100, you are an experienced banker. There's an improvement of 10 percentage points. And this improvement is larger for women. So this is a quite effective way, and also a way to reach the groups that have lower financial literacy in a way that is easily accepted by them.
Fabio, just to follow up, the financial educators who
Yeah.
participate in those television shows, they are staff of Banca d'Italia, right?
Yes.
They're not third parties.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Terrific. Klaas, dear Governor Knot, you also do lots of things, and you have a special population that you have studied extensively, and I would like you to describe a little bit, particularly in relation to part-time work, which I think is very relevant for the Netherlands.
Okay, Christine, thank you. And I will get into this, but I just want to say upfront also how grateful I am to be here on the panel. And this may surprise you, but I'm especially grateful here to be on the panel also with Joachim and Fabio, because I do
and
believe.
Claudia as well.
No. Wait. The point that I wanted to try to get across is that I do believe that the cause for equal opportunity and equal right of women should not just be a cause fought by women. That's the point I want to make, because I do believe that also we men, if I may sort of associate myself with that part of the population for a moment, we men, we should not accept sort of being part of a society where the war for talent, and the war for talent is ongoing, should be confined to only 50% of the population. And that is when I became governor in 2011 in the Netherlands Bank, and Frank was with me in the board. Of course, we had our female network run by the women. Mm-hmm. And then we had the board, almost all male, and we took note of the activities of the female network. And that was the first question that I then also asked, where are the men? It should be our cause as well. So I'm very happy that you invited us to be here. And in creating equal opportunity for women, I do think closing this gender gap is of utmost importance. Now, we have been doing a survey since 2005 on a consumer household survey together with Professor Lusardi, who worked with a number of researchers from within the bank. And even if the Netherlands has been, I think, at the forefront of many of these activities, and there are also lots of actions being taken in the Netherlands, still the gender gap is also there in the Netherlands, as you saw in the chart. If I can just give a couple of numbers, women receive 40% less in pension benefits than men. And pensions,
40%?
40. Yeah. The wealth gap is a staggering 70%. That's again dominated by pensions. And the reason, and this was actually in your question, Christine, one of the reasons is that in the Netherlands for a very, very long time, we had relatively low labor force participation of women. And to the extent that we had labor force participation of women, if we had double income earners, the moment the kids came, the woman started to reduce her working hours, and we had the sort of 1.5 income earner system, which was quite common actually, and has been quite common, and is still in certain corners quite common in the Netherlands. But without thinking through sufficiently what that means for the buildup of, for instance, pension assets. And what does it mean in terms of wealth equality? Now, also, the number of female investors, for instance, in the Netherlands is 20 to 30% lower than male investors. Hourly wages are still 12% lower. And if you look at financial independence, 56% of the women in the Netherlands are financially independent and 77% of the men. So also that is still quite significant. So there's a lot to that we need to do there. In that household survey, indeed, one of the findings is that part of it has to do with confidence, that men simply will not answer a question saying they don't know. They will bluff their way into an answer, but rather than say no. So if you take out the question, as Professor Lusardi indicated, that explains roughly 1/3 of the difference in responses. So that's a non-negligible factor, I would say. And well, also what makes a difference is we did a study for that was solely focused on payments. Mind the Gap was the title of the study. Men and women traditionally tend to do different financial transactions in a family. So if it comes to the mortgage, sort of the big financial transaction, usually it's left to the men. If it comes to grocery shopping and the small, let's say, weekly transactions, then women have a higher precedence there in these types of payments. And that, of course, leads to an unequal, I would say, decision-making power in a relationship, which I think is also something that is, in principle, unwelcome. It leads to gender disparities in payments. And interestingly, these disparities are not there in same-sex relationships. In same-sex relationships, it is actually very much 50-50 often the case. So that is something that I believe is very, very important that we pay attention to. Now, one last observation before we leave it to the question and answer session. We have been doing this research since 2005. And one sobering finding is that despite all the activities based on educating kids when they take out their first mobile phone subscription, which is quite a defining moment, educating families about how to run a budget, educating elderly about preparing for retirement, etc., etc. Despite all these activities, and there are numerous activities, I have slides if you want to hear them. I can go on for a long time.
All of that run by the bank.
All of that run in Dutch, no, not just by the bank, run also by the government, run by consumer organizations, by the private banks, the commercial banks. But the point I wanted to make, despite all of that, financial knowledge hardly goes up. So it is very difficult to measure a noticeable increase in financial. Since 2005, we have been doing these surveys. So it is apparently very stubborn material. It is, you have to have a very, very long-term perspective, and it requires a lot of hard work.
Wow. And that's what you started 20 years ago. So, Madam Professor, what can we do?
Well, this is why we
And
need
if you want to go back to exploring the confidence factor and
Yeah.
what the priorities should be to improve that, please feel free.
Absolutely. Let's take advantage of this confidence factor, because in fact, what we see is that women are more perceptive to financial education. And this is why I think we need a targeted program for the women. I've been starting to teach a course in personal finance more than 10 years ago, and I have many female students, by the way, and it's really gratifying to see what that course does for the life of the student, but we need to jumpstart that education much earlier. We need to have it in the schools because we see that it starts very early. And there is also a multiplier effect when you start financial education in the schools, because it actually spills over to the parents. And in fact, we found in recent research that it is the daughters who teach the parents, in particular the parents of low socioeconomic status.
The daughters more than the sons.
The daughters more than the son. So empower a girl and that knowledge will be spread over. Empower a woman and that financial knowledge will be spread over, for example, to their children, to their community.
Do you mind if on education, Governor Nagel, you want to go in?
Start my argument by using maybe when you try to learn a new language and you try to start this in the age of 25 or maybe 35, it takes you much longer. When you start to learn a language when you're 5, 6, 7 years old, then it goes much, much easier. What I would like to say is that we have to start from the beginning in the school. It should be part of the curriculum. I can say it for Germany when it comes to education. Germany is a really complicated setup. We have 16 federal states, so the states have the responsibility for education. So even when it comes to other areas, not financial literacy, there's also not this, we have many different gaps between the different states. So what I would like to say is there should be a kind of a federal initiative when it comes to financial literacy. It should be, so the kids should confronted with this in the age of 6, 7 years old. But what I feel in Germany, there's often this resistance when it comes to topics like economics. Should that be part of what kids have to learn in school? Yes, I believe it has to be part of everyday's life. When you're going to school, learn about all these important things.
And Governor Panetta is going to tell you how it works in Italy
We may have taken advantage of the cooperation, the long-standing cooperation with Professor Lusardi, and we have launched programs for students. We teach the teachers. We are in touch with a number of districts in the country in which we train the teachers, and then we intervene directly in teaching to students. Let me just mention that since last year, financial education is mandatory in primary schools in Italy.
mandatory.
Mandatory.
So it's across the
It has
country.
to be part of the school program. And the Banca d'Italia is cooperating, has to cooperate with the Ministry of Public Instruction to design the programs and to implement the programs. Wow. So in this sense, we have already done what Joachim very correctly was suggesting to be necessary to improve financial education. By the way, let me say that in Italy, the starting point maybe compared to the Netherlands is different, but we have seen an improvement. Also for females, as I mentioned before, when females are trained and they become employed, their understanding of financial matters improves significantly. And also the program we have launched for students suggests that last year we reached 70,000 students. We had an average increase in the understanding of financial matters of 8%, larger for girls than for boys. We also
and
have,
Fabio, that proves the point of
yes,
you, Professor, that girls are actually very sensitive and respond to education and training.
Absolutely,
right?
and this is part of the improvement I was mentioning before. Also, we have launched a dedicated project for women. Women count, le donne contano, for the Italians who don't speak English in this room.
La donna conta, yeah?
Exactly. It's a targeted program for adult women in which we introduce basic financial education concepts, addressing the key motivation for the financial literacy gap, which is underconfidence. The program is available on our platform Economics for All, and there's an interactive program for women. And also we intervene also directly, because in some cases, the difficulty that we face is to get in touch with those that really need more training on financial matters, because central banks are highly respected institutions, but sometimes they could intimidate their interlocutors. So we operate this program together with the unions, with women's association, with organizations of civil society at the regional level with our branches. Again, in a very informal setting, we introduce basic concepts, and here we have our ex-post measures. This is a randomized sample in which you compare the improvement in financial literacy of those who were subject to the project compared to a control sample. The improvement for women was 30%, 30.
Professor Lusardi, I'm sorry because I interrupted you.
I was too long, sorry.
Please, I'll go back to you.
I shut up.
The fact that the needle didn't move in the Netherlands over a period of 20 years in the measurements, whereas it apparently moved in Italy.
It does. We need visionary leader to do more work, because the benefits are going to happen in the future. And it's important that we start in the school, we start as soon as possible. I think when the tooth fairy comes, remember, it's going to bring some money, right? So maybe that's time where we can already teaching about money, but also we need to do more. What is done so far, I think, is not able to address this persistent gap. In addition to the school, we need to be in the workplace. We need to be where people go to learn for information. And this is why there is an important role for the media as well. We need to discuss this topic and to discuss it often. We need to make it a topic that we read often, for example, like health or like food.
Right.
At the Initiative for Financial Decision Making at Stanford, one of our mission is to change the conversation about money. Let's talk about it.
Because you are the queen, you know about what Banca Negara Malaysia does. The use of very animated cartoons and just to explain basic principle. What's the difference between inflation and price levels and things like that? Does the format that education take actually matter?
I think it matters a lot because we want to be everywhere and we want to use the language that people use. Of course, finance has its own language, but this can be a barrier for those who don't speak that language. So sometimes we need to meet in the middle, right? We need to use a different language, in particular for the adult population, but even for the young. And by the way, women are very affected by that. In our survey, we actually see that as soon as we use jargon, the proportion of do not know increase even further. And I think it discourages, in a sense, as you use a very formal conversation, you might actually miss a lot of the population, and in particularly women. So I think we really need as well to change the conversation ourselves. We need to speak about women, about money in a way that is easy to understand.
Do you think we can do that?
Yes, why not? I mean,
it feels comfortable to be in our jargon, doesn't it?
Yeah, it feels comfortable to be in our jargon, but we also know that there are different sort of pieces of research that if you continue to communicate in your jargon, if, for instance, in the Netherlands, there's this subdivision of 5 or 6 social classes in society, we as a central bank, we only reach let's say, 2 out of the 6 social classes because of the channels of communication. And we are thinking very hard, how can we actually also reach, for instance, the working middle class? A lot of the working middle class doesn't read papers anymore. They don't watch the news anymore. So they get their information from totally different channels on which you have to adjust. Now, I think what I think is very, very important is that you do so jointly. And so in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands is a relatively small country, so it's maybe a little bit easier to find each other. But we have this platform, which is called MoneyWise. It's run from the Ministry of Finance, but the banking industry participates in it, the National Institute of the Budget, the Consumer Protection Authorities. We at the Netherlands Bank participate in it. And so we have this weekly money week, this yearly money week. So we have 1 week in the year, which is entirely focused at money. For instance, employers of D&B then go to the schools of their kids to teach a lesson about money. And these are all interactive games. They're online games that we try to motivate.
Is it all in Dutch?
I guess it is all in Dutch, yes. Yes, it is all in Dutch, but it could easily be translated. I mean, that's nowadays, it's a small effort to translate it. It is all in Dutch, but I would say it's important because the moment, what the point that Joachim was making, when you are young, you learn the things automatically. Yeah. When you're older, it's not automatic learning anymore. So running a budget, for instance, and that the fact that when the budget is finished, that it should also be finished. And that implies also, I think, a bit of teaching for parents, right? Because if your daughter gets to you and say, oh, I'm out of my money, daddy, please. It's difficult to say no, but you really have to tell parents that maybe...
You've been there, I can see that.
Not every month, but regularly so, I can assure you. So that is quite important, that it is about the kids and it is about the parents themselves. And then secondly...
I'm intrigued by your idea of the games. So there are games that have been designed?
Oh yeah, online games that are available. And also when we teach in that week, these are very interactive games. And also in our new visitor center, you know, we have our new building, which finally, after 10 years of etc., we have gone back to our new building. And in the new building, in our new visitor center, we all have interactive games about inflation, about financial supervision, but also about running a budget. Knowing where to spend your money and not the investment, make investment choices, etc. Interactive works a lot better than, let's say, the normal material that we use as central bankers.
Yeah. Thank you. Claudia, I interrupted you earlier because I knew I was going to come back to you because you have ideas about what else can we do and what more.
Yes, yes. And actually not very surprisingly, so how we teach finance and economics and to whom, I think this is crucially important. And the second, and this has also been mentioned, it's our communication. To whom do we communicate? How do we do it? How do we explain what we do? So two little examples, again, from research that has been done, and I think maybe one project has even been done with the Bundesbank, I'm not fully sure. This was interventions at school where students in Germany were taught financial literacy concepts, and then there was a follow-up. So how would these students then take financial decisions afterwards? And apparently, the result of that intervention of teaching financial literacy was that they're more patient, they're less risk-taking. So there was an impact. So, and I think I would urge, and we've all heard about different initiatives in also different countries, no, which have different, very different backgrounds. I think it's really important when you do these interventions that you also check how effective they are. So, and this is one example that really teaching financial literacy matters. I have another little example, which I think is also interesting, and this is about teaching finance and economics at universities. So there was one study being done at, I think it was Goethe University here in Frankfurt, where there was a big programs on teaching finance and so forth. And so that study looked at the students who wanted to be finance students before they started studying finance, and then also they followed up upon it. And apparently there's also a pre-selection of people into studying finance, maybe even economics, in the sense that these students, and again, I'm just citing the evidence from this study, so I don't know whether this holds also in different samples, but apparently these students were a little bit less willing to cooperate, a little bit more willing to exploit the trust of others. So there seems to be kind of also selection into these topics. So I mentioned this because we talk a lot about, do we have a certain jargon, and who are the people using this jargon? So there might also be a perception in the broader population that this is a different type of people, so they're less willing. And I think whenever we talk about finance and money, trust is so important. So maybe it's also an issue about how do we trust also those who were speaking to us in this financial jargon. And so this, again, I think has implications for us, because we also communicate with a broader population, and we need also, for the work we are doing, we need the trust from the population, that they trust us in maintaining price stability, financial stability, banking supervision. So I think we also need to reach out and maybe also use different narratives and different jargon if we want to reach out to a broader population and explain what we do for them, because this is ultimately what we do in the public sector. So we started this in the banking supervision in the ECB. So when we do country visits, going to the different countries that are members of the SSM, we also reach out to the civil society. So we speak to very different groups. And actually in one country, I saw groups that are working on financial literacy, that are working with the poorest parts of the population. And that was really interesting to see what is happening there. So, but that of course also needs a little bit of work from our side, because we need to change how we talk about what we do. We need to use less technical terms. We need to use narratives that really reach the people. So this is also one of the themes that we follow up upon. I think it's crucially important, not just to whom do we teach, but how do we communicate?
Joachim, thank you very much, Claudia. I was going to ask you the last question for the panel, because then we will turn it over to the to all of you if you want to ask questions, and I think I will ask you, Paul, to give me a hand on that. But I wanted to you respond to whatever you want, but I also wanted to ask you whether you think that digital is going to help us. I've heard platform here, platform there, La Donna Conta. I mean, clearly there's a new way to reach those targeted audience that Fabio was talking about. If you want to address that as well.
Thank you very much, Christine, because I can connect your question related to what we just discussed. I ask myself, when we're talking about communication, and we love to speak in our jargon. For example, when we are discussing things like R-star, we know what R-star is. But leaving this building here, leaving this building here, and maybe get between the ECB building and where you are asking people maybe 300 meters, and ask somebody on the street, what is our star? I believe maybe 1 out of 1,000, maybe 10,000 can tell you what our star is. So also we have to work on ourselves, the language we are using. And now coming to my point and to the core of your question, using technology. We are testing now for a couple of months AI when I give a speech. So when I give a speech, we use an AI tool that gives you an indication, is the content of the speech, could that be understood by an average person? And you will get really funny results, funny results. So what I would like to say, it's also something we have to address in a way that it could be understood. So AI and other technologies are super helpful in that regard. Maybe we should have smart approach how to get access to people, especially young people, women, men, everyone. I think there are a lot of good things out, and we are doing a lot of work on that on the Bundesbank side, that we are trying to work together. This is an idea with the university here in Frankfurt to develop such a smart app that could give you an easy access to all the things that we would like to see that kids, young people, but I guess it's for everyone should know, and really financial literacy is, I guess,
but in the form of what, tutorial games?
Yeah, tutorial games, everything.
Stories?
I think we should use the whole range of available tools, but AI technology applications on your smartphones, I think we should use all of these things. It's a combination of different instruments. This
Professor
is my point.
Lusardi, do you want to react to that?
We live in the Silicon Valley, and this is what we do every day. Already AI has been incorporated in our teaching. In the Initiative for Financial Decision Making, we are working on an app which incorporates technology indeed and AI, actually to teach the young professional in our case. This is one of the targets, so the people just outside of college and so on. But this is now, I think, we have available a technology that allows us to probably.
Can we all access your platform?
Of course.
How is it called?
Can all, right? It's called Initiative for Financial Decision Making, IFDM. So, and we are also all invited to visit us
Repeat again,
at Stanford
Initiative
for Financial Decision Making.
Okay.
Stanford Initiative for Financial Decision Making. Welcome to our website. We are posting a lot of the initiative. We are also growing the next generations of researchers working on these topics, and we are very happy to also have visitor at our university.
You have money-wise.
Yeah. Maybe Christine, one final point. Maybe I forgot this to mention, because we are representing here a different generation. Here we.
What do you mean?
No,
yeah.
No.
So
wait a minute. Let's be specific. Much younger.
So we have to also include the young generation. So we have to use influencers, for example. This is what we are doing when we are doing events, that we are trying to do this via influencers. Try to really reach out to the young generation. So we have to maybe think out of the box when we are talking about financial literacy.
So you mean educating educators would also mean educating influencers and Fabio, and then we open the floor.
Extensively in all our programs. Our platform, Economics for All, is based on interactive relationship with the visitors, and it also uses artificial intelligence. We have used in our Museum of Money digital animations, edu games, interactive technology, immersive educational digital reading, because I barely know what these things mean in detail, but we have been using technology very extensively, and this is necessary to attract the young generations. They like this. They love dealing with financial matters in a digital form, and games. They are really attracted by games.
Yeah. All right, last example.
No, just one example of games. Monetary policy. So what we did, we had an interactive game where kids could sit in a car and they got information on the economy, and you either hit the gas or you hit the brake. And so they physically had to do,
So can you use
to
this in
steer
the governing
sort of
council?
the economy toward 2% inflation.
Hike or cuts, hike
Exactly.
or cuts.
Hike or
Okay.
cut, gas or
So
break.
Christine, we have to have this in the governing council.
And that was big fun. But then on a very basic level, you try to teach the sort of the relationship between what we do and the inflation outcome. So they were presented with new information on the economy. What do? Do you pull the put on the brake or do you hit the gas?
Wow. And were you training them a little bit beforehand? So
well, we were handing out prizes at the end for the best performance, and that always works very well.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we continue to be economists. We believe in incentives. Yeah.
All right. Floor is open. Any of you who has a question, and then Paul, you will be monitoring questions online. What you can do is stand up, say who you are, and ask your questions. And if you want to address it to one in particular, please do so. We'll take 3 questions and then another batch of 3. Off you go.
Okay. No, many thanks for the very interesting talk. So my name is Pavel Sikora. I'm from the European Central Bank, DG Legal Services. Thanks for the interesting data shared. I was wondering whether we could also address a more broader question relating to education, which has relevance for all the factors which were discussed here, like the life prospects, the understanding what the ECB does, and overall also the war on talent mentioned by Mr. Knot. And this is the educational achievement, where there is also a gender gap, roughly also like 20 percentage points, but going in the opposite direction. So only about 40% of men in the EU achieve tertiary education, so university or other tertiary education, while 60% of women. And I'm wondering what the ECB and maybe the Eurosystem intends to do about closing that gender gap, also considering that the ECB is investing quite heavily in the education of women, roughly 200,000 euros per year, and also in areas which are not necessarily directly relevant for the ECB, like space engineering or bioinformatics or biostatistics, and also in areas where women actually graduate more than men, like economics. So I understand that we see a relevance for education, like for central banks to engage in supporting education. And I would like to know what you would like to do in order to close that gap. I would address it primarily to Mrs. Lagarde. Thank you.
Poor men. Yeah. They are suffering a lot, aren't they? Okay, I'll come back to you. We're taking 3 questions. So 2 questions. Isabel, my only female colleague on the governing council. So it may well be that they graduate more, but they're not that many in those circles.
So thank you very much for this fascinating panel and for also choosing this this important topic. I actually wanted to come back to a point that Claudia raised, which I think is actually quite interesting. So we all know money and finance is also about power. And so what Claudia said, and I think it's probably right, is that this gap in financial literacy then has broader implications. It has an impact on educational choices. So whether you study economics and finance, that then has an impact on where you end up, whether you end up in the financial sector, whether you end up in a central bank. And in the end, maybe the gap in financial literacy explains why you, dear President, and I are only 2 women out of a governing council with 26 members. And then that, of course, also has an impact on the decision making. So what does the panel think about this? So I think, I would actually also like to thank Annamaria for the excellent work that she's done with many of the colleagues here also at the ECB and tell you how hugely important this is what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. Yes, Bernard.
Bernard Stricker, address myself to you, Madam President. And actually, I checked before I came here. On our external website, nor in the Eureka training system, do we have any course on financial literacy or any kind of presentation that we give to people coming to the ECB. Every day we have classes streaming through the ECB. We have even pensioners, we have people of all ages. why don't we offer them something on financial literacy? And I would even extend that to my colleagues here who are highly skilled, but writing policies is not the same than financial literacy.
You know, thank you, Bernard, for your question. You actually answered your own question by saying that we do not have a financial literacy class on the website. And I believe, but you know, I stand to be corrected because I don't have the answer to everything. But I believe that it has been sort of historically the case that within the Euro system, we have considered, and this is part, you know, before my time, that national central bank were the primary port of call when it came to financial literacy, when it came to education, when it came to training. And for instance, in Germany, for example, I think the Bundesbank is the national central bank that is associated with courses, training, and all the rest of it. Now, we do give a lot of courses. We do, you know, provide a lot of educational and training. But I think you're right on financial literacy itself. I mean, unless, and as I said, I stand to be corrected because I don't have the answer to all. But the expert that has so ably organized this this symposium, thank you so much, tells me no. But maybe Frank has an idea and he has a yes answer. So Frank Elderson, member of the executive board. So it must be in supervision matters that there's a lot more.
No, there's this one initiative by two of our trainees, which I think requires a little bit of attention because it's a wonderful thing and it goes to the core of what we have been discussing. Because they're from Italy, and they came to the conclusion that it would actually be very nice if they went back to their own school. And they felt that if they went back to their own school, still being relatively young, and they would be sitting there in that class, being able to say to all these kids in this class, and this is an underprivileged area of Italy, and they could show that they, you know, only 10 years earlier were sitting there, and now they were working for the European Central Bank. That could kind of like create a bridge that would then make it possible for them to, at the same time, teach a lot about what finance is. And they are trying to get all trainees to do this. And actually, they're trying not only to all trainees to do this, but then all staff members of the ECB to do this, because we all went to a school. And then if you think about all the people that don't just work for the ECB, but also for the European system of central banks, and why not the SSM, there is tens of thousands of staff members that could go back to their high schools and their elementary schools and reach many, many people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Claudia, you wanted to add something? It was
Yeah, to this one about teaching, I think even if there are no dedicated financial literacy initiatives, but I think we're doing a lot of things to explain what we do. There's this espresso economics, which I find very useful, where there will also be more content related to supervision. So maybe if it's not exactly dedicated to that topic, but I think we do a lot in a very intuitive way to explain what we do, and maybe more can be done in that format. I would like to pick on Isabel's point briefly. Actually, we have more women in the supervisory board than there are in the governing council. So it would be interesting to see what is the driver behind this. So this is, and I think it's very useful in terms of, and I see some of the colleagues here like Alessandra, I think it's very useful in terms of the collective decision making that we do in the supervisory board. And of course, something that we look at when we look at the banks, and I thought maybe that Frank was pointing to that, so that we look at the collective suitability of bank boards. Of course, this is not necessarily something where we can enforce more gender diversity, because we also depend on the national laws, but it's certainly something that we look at, and it's very important. And also I think there we've turned the dial a little bit, because we see that more banks have gender diversity policies in place, and of course we make sure that it's not just on paper, but it's also it is also reflected in the governance framework. So there's a bit we can do in that space. I think that is crucially important also.
But let me maybe underline the point that Isabel made. I think it's not only true for central banking. When you're going outside the central bank world and you count the numbers of female DAX CEOs, I guess there are not so many, as far as I'm not wrong. Maybe somebody knows the number. I guess is it maybe one person? I'm not sure, but maybe
less than 10%.
Less than 10%. So what I would like to say is that it's still a world like this famous book, Lords of Finance.
Yeah.
So, and it's about power at the end, and it's about influence at the end. And so, yeah, this is absolutely right. Sitting here as a man saying this.
And to address the first question that we had, you know, clearly we are doing we have some special action in order to help women access those positions that we have just discussed. So we've put in place many years ago, before my time actually, a scholarship program that is intended for women. I think we have 50, if I recall. I speak under the control of the team here. There are 50 women who are regularly selected with great scrutiny to make sure that they have the best credentials and that they really deserve support. And we focus in the fields of macroeconomics. We have recently extended in order to make sure that we improve also the percentage of women coming from STEM training, but accessing in particular information services and technology. So that's the field to which we have extended it. And you know, it's good news if what you say is correct in the fields of macroeconomics, which I would like to see actually, or technology, that women are now graduating more. What I find very puzzling, you know, for myself at the age that I have reached is why is it that we would have that discrepancy, and why does it reverse so much over the course of time? Because in the target and quota policy that we pursue, we are not at 50-50. Far from that, actually. And in a very disaggregated and very fragmented way, we are in certain areas close to 40%, but not even at 40%. But I'm sure that you will be giving me the details of this 60-40, which I'm interested in. Anyone? Yeah? No, wait, there is one just behind you, and then it's over to you.
Okay, sorry, thank you. Hi, I'm Matteo, I'm a trainee in DG Statistics. So first of all, thank you again for the panel discussion. So I had a question for Professor Lusardi mainly, and it has to do with that underconfidence that we have discussed before. I was wondering if you think that, or if we have data on the possibility that maybe, I was thinking that the persistence and the reliance even on traditional gender roles and stereotypes may affect like expectations even on the dating life, on marriage life, and in turn family education, that leads to like an implicit and involuntary set of incentives that is put into place that leads to specialization of the different genders into financial matters. Like it, in plain terms, it's maybe some men and some women may still have the idea that it's a man's job to take care of the bills, of taxes, and so on. And so even before this dating actually starts, education carries through in a way that leads to this specialization. And this leads me also to a related question that has to do with bringing financial literacy into public education, because if what we are saying is true, like the family is not enough basically to rely on. And I'm wondering why it feels that we have such a hard time in Europe in getting finance and financial literacy into public education. I've been studying in the United States for a while, and they have mandatory courses there in every high school. Here it feels like there's this sort of opposition from families and people in general.
Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely. Yes? And then I go to you.
Thank you very much. As one of the rare female central bank governors in the global financial community, I'm really privileged to be here. But I also was very privileged to listen to very passionate presentations of presidents of the Netherlands bank, Deutsche Bundesbank and Banca d'Italia. And I'm wondering, given the fact that the financial literacy and financial female leadership has been one of the driving forces of my agenda, be it at the helm of the National Development Bank or in the central bank, and that we cannot separate leadership from financial literacy at the sort of, well, targeting the top echelons, whether there might be, in view of the implementation of the Directive of Women on Boards that Claudia was referring to, scope for the European Central Bank being at the helm of the European Financial Literacy and Leadership Network, because I believe that that would actually help replicate successful practices that we have in central banks in some of the countries. And I dare say that my country is well, front runner not only in the region, but also surpassing quite a number of EU economies in terms of impact and results in driving this agenda. I'd be interested in seeing what the ECB president, but also the other panelists think on that. And back to one of the comments made by President Nagel on the situation in DAX and situation in Germany and implementation of the directive. I have to say that I was ambassador in France during the time when President Lagarde was Minister of Finance and Economy. At that time, she was at the helm of initiative again of economic empowerment and economic representation of women at highest level. Back then, in France, women were at 15% at CAC 40. In 2021, they surpassed 45%, so it is possible. Thank you.
That's right. The power of the law and a few people to lead it. Absolutely right. So a third question coming from the web, and then we'll come to 3 more questions and turning also to your side, because otherwise it's not fair. Over to you.
Yes, hello. So I'll be reading a question from online. This one comes from Marcella Flood from the Central Bank of Ireland. It's a short question. She asks, how do we leverage the work already done, as we heard from the Netherlands, Italy, etc., so that we can bring this to everyone in Europe?
Ah, good. I think I'll take that one. Professor Lusardi.
Yeah.
You go.
Thank you for this question. You are absolutely right that the gender difference can be endogenous, right? It's not a gene. And we also see that, there can be specialization within the family. So that explains part of the gender gap. But I have to say, we see the gender gap even among single people. So, it's not only that specialization. The other thing is, it's probably not a great strategy, some of the specialization, because the divorce rate is also high and because women live longer than men. Right, so we have to be careful even within that household specialization, which is also to say there is not one single explanation for the gender gap. There is a variety of explanation, and we have to incorporate that. And this is why we also need a lot of initiative, not just one, to address this important gender gap.
Thank you. The question from our colleague governor. Do you want to address that?
Yeah, no, I think it would be actually quite good if there was, if you look at the governing council, for instance, as Isabel pointed out, 26 members, 2 female members, and both from the ECB side, and no female governors around. Of course, in an ideal world, you would have much more coordination. And in a world where quota actually work, and I think they have proven to work in circumstances where they had been applied, it would have been nice if we could also apply that to the ECB Governing Council. Unfortunately, the reality is that the selection of national governors is still seen to be very much a national process where the ECB has little role to play. Little role to, well, if any role to play, I would say no role to play. And so this is, I think, part of the system. We have a centralized, decentralized system in the Euro system. And I don't think any of the governments is willing to give up at this moment the competence to nominate a national governor. But that should not imply that there should not be more pressure on the governance, because role models, the point that Frank made, role models matter an awful lot in the world. And the fact that in Southeastern Europe, we have an IMF constituency with a lot of Southeastern countries, 4 female governors. So why is it possible in Southeastern Europe? Why is it not possible in Northwestern Europe?
And by the way, they don't make a mess of the job.
They came there to clean up the mess in many cases.
Thank you.
So let's be fair on this. So in an ideal world, yes, that would be the case. Unfortunately, I think we're still quite a bit away from that ideal world. But role models, I think, really matter. Christine, you probably have broken more glass ceilings than probably anywhere else here in the world. And I think that matters.
I'm all bruised now. Yeah. So the question, it was Central Bank of Ireland, right? So can I announce it? Okay. You will be announcing the 5, but we have good news because given the importance of the topic, we're not going to make it a one-shot event, but it's going to be a 3-year cycle. So when we see each other in a year's time, in 2 years' time, we will have to account for what we are soon going to commit to do. That's one thing. The second thing is that we will have on our website a special repository of all the platform, the techniques, the links, that have been described for all of us today, and more from all the central banks, many of which are represented today. Because for those who are online, you don't know that we have with us the central bank governor of the Bank of Belgium, of the Bank of Cyprus, of the Bank of Ireland, the Bank of Croatia, and of the Bank of Slovakia, and of the Bank of Estonia. I knew I was going to, no, I know, but we have a little joke between us because I always refer to him as the central bank governor of Estonia, but he's the central bank governor of Lithuania.
But they're close.
It's an ongoing joke because I made the mistake once of introducing him publicly as. So that will be, I don't know that it will be up and running in the next 2 weeks, but this is really a plan that we have in order to make sure that it's available on a very broad basis. So we're going to move to the other side now. 2 questions here and 1 more if you're receiving one from the website.
Thank you very much. My name is Katharina Klausch. I work in the SSM in the legal department. And I would like to add 1 more dimension to the discussion, which was very inspiring. I think there's also a very democratic dimension to this discussion. We've just seen in Germany the elections going on. If you want to be able to understand the different parties' agendas, programs for the elections, a big part of that is the economic concept behind it that they are propagating. So in order to be enabled to take choices as a democrat, person in your country, you need to be able to understand the economics behind the programs of the parties. That's 1 point. And the second point that's very also related to it is that we see the AfD has been voted a lot by people so-called in protest and from lower societal layers. However, somehow they probably did not understand fully what the AfD is propagating for them, which is more, to the side of the rich people in Germany, not so much their positions in poorer parts of Germany. So this is a very, very important question for democracy as well, the financial literacy, and connected, of course, mathematics and skills in mathematics, which we know from the OECD studies are there's differences also between boys and girls and so on. So this is also connected. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing that dimension, really. It was not a question addressed to anyone, but a great, great contribution.
Trust in institutions is really positively associated with financial knowledge.
True.
Yeah.
And that's
true.
good for stability of society.
And maybe I really couldn't agree more what was just said. I think we have to put this much higher on the agenda because it's going beyond what we had discussed so far. It's absolutely right. It's about us. It's about our democracies and how things maybe might evolve over the next year. So maybe, Christine, and I really appreciate your new initiative. You should get more into the driver's seat when it comes to financial literacy.
Okay, that's good. So there will be a budget discussion coming up soon.
Well, there is so much space for cuts elsewhere.
Yeah. Any question? I saw a hand there. Yes, okay.
Many thanks for the very interesting talk. I am Aurora from the ECB Market Operations, and I am curious to hear your opinion on a trade-off. Like, on the one hand, the pessimistic opinion about pension schemes and in general welfare schemes, and the raising of fintech might encourage people to get more financially literate. Like, for instance, the fact that while I'm doing online shopping, I see the possibility of paying my item in installments. But on the other hand, low economic growth, low wage might discourage people and might prevent them from getting financially literate because they have fewer means, and financial literacy might just translate in I do not spend and I do not invest because I cannot afford it. So what is your opinion on this trade-off in the near future? Thank you.
If I hear you well, you're saying that the more literate I am in financial matters, the more I'm likely to save because of the hostility and the risk out there. In a nutshell, is that right?
Yeah.
I will then turn to you, Professor Lusardi.
Yeah, I'm very happy to answer this question. It's actually very important, and thank you for saying that. Clearly, again, financial literacy is endogenous, and there are many incentives to acquire it or not. I want to make sure one thing about the fintech. You know, people sometimes think that fintech is going to replace financial literacy. In fact, it's a complement to financial literacy. It's not a substitute, because now that you can move some of money with a click, you need to know even more. And we have actually seen that people use fintech without being financially literate end up doing worse than people who don't use it. So like the warning about this. The second thing you said actually is important. We do see, and this is why the correlation is tricky, we see in the data that people with low, for example, socioeconomic status have lower financial literacy. But I have to tell you, the incentive is not to acquire it, because what we see, in my view, is that financial literacy or the lack of financial literacy is very regressive, meaning people with low knowledge and low income pay a lot more for financial services. They are the one who do not compare term when they borrow. They are the one who don't refinance mortgages when the interest rate go down. They are the one who stick, for example, with for example, fixed rate mortgages, even though the interest rate is high. And so, financial illiteracy can really be a detriment. And I would say, it is even more important for people which have low economic status. And this is also why I think we need to provide access to financial literacy and make it easy to get that financial education.
In a targeted way.
Yeah.
So one more question from the website and then from Governor Buch.
Yeah, we have another question from online. Younger people are increasingly taking information about finance via social media. How do we ensure that groups do not become victims of these influencers with conflicting interests?
That's a huge question. So, you know what? I'm going to save that question for the final round, where I give 2 minutes to each governor to identify their priority. And I think that that's a good one. Pierre. Governor Buch of the Central Bank of Belgium.
Thank you. No, I have a question. I don't know if we already have had time to look at that, but the fact basically that a lot of people have invested in Bitcoins or some of the equivalents have made a lot of money, while we were as institutions saying, I mean, this is just not, not safe, way too dangerous and so on. I'm wondering, how big is the damage to the notion of financial literacy when people start saying, basically, I mean, the elites have been telling us, and the elites, quote unquote, don't buy Bitcoins because you are going to lose money. And so many people have become, millionaires by investing in Bitcoin. So I wonder if we have already had time to look at that, and I guess to the damage it has done in terms of our credibility in terms of financial literacy.
Pierre, to be fair, I think also so many people have lost their shirt out of investing. So it cannot be just one-sided. Gabriel, last call.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you for this this whole discussion, which has been excellent. I was going to make one point, but I'm just going to answer, just address Pierre's point just now. Don't buy Bitcoin. The point I was going to make, which was, it came up in the discussion earlier on the panel, and it was a part of a question, I think, from the floor. But one of the groups that I think, if we are, in particular at the ECB, going to try and sort of push this agenda more, that we need to connect with is the teaching profession. Because actually, the solution, a very big solution to addressing the issue of gender disparity in financial literacy, but financial literacy just generally for everybody, lies in the early years at school and through the secondary system as well. And I think historically too much effort has been invested in teaching adults. Financial literacy is seen as an adult thing. And I think that's too late. But I also observe, and I'm not an expert on this, but my observation is that the teaching profession resists this. It's seen as alien. And I think that is a problem. and we'll only solve it if we work with them to address it.
Very good point. Yeah. So I hope it's all right with all of you. I know there are other questions coming up, but I would like to ask each of the panelists who have volunteered their time and who are very concerned about this project to submit in 2 minutes each. I'll be ruthless with the 2 minutes. Priorities, learnings, and you're going to also access or give a response to the question about the credibility of the information that is released on social media. That was the question. Fabio.
On social media, it's clear that many young boys and girls do pay very high attention to social media, and they may fall victim of fake news. The solution is very simple. We have to be present on social media too. And we use social media to implement our financial education programs. Of course, it's a very daunting task because it's an immense universe, but we have to engage with the young generations on these media. On our commitment, President, I commit in advance to what will be announced later. So I agree without listening to the proposal, but we know the proposal. So
wait, it's coming.
I do agree that we should step up our efforts on financial education to improve financial literacy. We should cooperate at European level, putting together the data, the analytical capacities to compare best practices. And I think we have to do this for all the good reasons that you mentioned before, because this is part of our core business. By the way, the Banca d'Italia is responsible for consumer protection in Italy. And as part of this task, we have to deal with financial education. But there's also another reason, probably the most important one, why we have to get involved with financial literacy. And it is very simple, because it is the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do to allow families to plan their future, to plan their pension time, to be able to withstand serious shocks such as illness. In short, to be able to live their life in peace with their families. We are public servants, and this is the contribution we can and should make to society.
Thank you, Fabio. Professor Lusardi.
So be a voice for change. Central banks are very important. Everybody recognize your expertise. And so I'm also calling not just to the people here, but in the audience, on this floor, but also in the audience, and everyone also attending online, for being a voice for change. I think we need this change. And we need concrete steps. And that's why, hopefully we will describe these 5 steps, for example, that, have been decided today, because, concrete steps are important. We cannot just leave it as a discussion. And because I think research has a lot of suggestions to give in order to be more effective, to be more targeted. We have evidence of what works and what doesn't work. So it's time for action. Women are half of the population, and we know that when we empower them and we give them the knowledge and the confidence, there are important results in terms of saving, financial security, championing a world that gives women a good shot at financial security can benefit us all. Imagine what a future we can create.
Thank you, Professor Lusardi. Joachim.
Thank you very much, Christine. First, about social media. I saw yesterday a fake video of myself on Facebook giving investment advice for a weird product.
Oh, it was fake.
Yeah, it was fake. It was fake. So when you ever, so what I would like to say with this is that we have to be really cautious here, careful, but we have also to use all the social media networks. I think we should take that as a kind of an instrument, and also have this cross check and balances what's on there, what is wrong, and so we have to also take care on what's going on there. And I couldn't agree, as always, with my friend Fabio, what you said about European, dear friend Fabio, dear friend Fabio, when it comes to European cooperation. And so I learned a lot here from this panel that so many things are going on already within the Euro system. And we should take advantage of this and coordinate and learn from each other. And at the end, and I couldn't agree more here as well, it is about leadership. We have to be an example for what we think is necessary to do. And yeah, we should bring ourselves into the driver's seat.
Yeah. Thank you, Joachim.
Maybe I'll take the point on crypto assets, because that is, it's an issue that we also had to deal with a lot in the FSB context, and there are strong views.
Financial Stability Board.
Financial stability on prohibiting versus etc. And so one of the points that I've always been making is we also don't prohibit people from going to casinos, do we? So a crypto asset is a very, very risky investment. But okay, you can make a lot of money with a very, very risky investment. We cannot prohibit people from taking very risky bets in their life, but we should tell them, please do not do so with borrowed money, with leverage. And what it all boils down to is good education and transparency about the risks. And from the household survey in the Netherlands, this is one of the most problematic areas. So if you ask people about the quality of investment advice, this is one of the questions where the scores are actually the lowest. So I do think that in terms, people are free to take investments, but I think it's our role to make sure that people understand the risks, understand what they are buying into. And there, I think a lot of progress can still be made, because this is one of the areas where I think, unfortunately, financial literacy is among the lowest.
But you would make the same recommendation as Joachim, even though you have not been faked yet. Be cautious.
Yeah, be cautious. I mean, I see my kids on TikTok and all these influencers buying stuff, and how can you believe this? I mean, it's so fake, but yet it has a lot of impact. So the only thing you can do is indeed also be active on social media and try to make visible that these are actually commercial videos and not spontaneous videos.
Thank you. Claudia.
No, I mean, I think it has become very clear that we have two gender gaps and they are related. Now, one is financial literacy, and we also have a gender gap in finance, the financial sector more broadly, and we need to work on closing these gaps as good as we can. And I think also the measures that can be taken have also been very clear to me. One is, to whom do we teach finance and economics? When is a good teachable moment? I think this is critical. I think we have to also adjust our communication strategies and the channels so that we are not just, delivering information on paper, which we don't do, of course, but I'm just exaggerating a bit, and then others communicate via social media. So we also have to be there. And I tend to believe actually the work we do as supervisors is also providing, sources for trusted information on the financial sector, how the financial sector is working. So I think this is crucially important that we also communicate well. And I would really like to emphasize the point, because I think it was only mentioned once, that Governor Panetta made about cooperation with the Consumer Protection Authority. So many of the national competent authorities that sit around the supervisory board table also have a consumer protection mandate, which we don't have. But of course, the line is very thin between supervision, also understanding of monetary policy matters, consumer protection. So I think there's a space where we can cooperate more within our mandates, and I think we should really explore that space.
And they are very worried about buy now, pay later.
Oh my God.
Fintech schemes that are, I mean.
Yeah. So before you all go, let me first of all thank all of you for being attentive and interested in this matter. Let's take the opportunity of thanking the whole team which has set up that event. And to lead that team, I'm going to call on Stefania Sicola. Wait, don't hold your applause, because she's going to put us to a test of honoring within 1 year 5 commitments that have been discussed. Stefania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you all of you for being here and taking this opportunity, in fact. And allow me to say we have on the website a new page, hub page, called Financial Literacy in Europe. And this is the page that gathers precisely all the initiatives done by the different central banks in all the Euro area countries. So this is an innovative page And we
will
hope it's going
continue
to
to
grow.
populate it with
Exactly.
everything that we have heard.
We will continue populate it also between what's happening today and what will happen, what we'll be measuring in March 26. And we discussed this and we came to 5 commitments for today. So commitment number 1 is to be voice for change and keep raising awareness in the respective countries, institutions, and communities. Commitment number 2 is establishing a central bank financial literacy network, which will be focusing on promoting financial literacy and addressing the gender gap. They will be sharing best practices, resources, and take action. Commitment number 3 is to enlarge this financial literacy network to the national competent authorities with their consumers protection function. Commitment number 4 is completing and harmonizing a comparable data set across Europe, extending data collection to those countries which lack such data, and creating standardized measures for financial literacy. And last but not least, commitment number 5, enhancing the efficacy of what has been done already in 3 key, what is so-called teachable moments of people's life, which is 1, during early education, 2, when taking a major loan, for example, to buy a house or start a business, and 3, in building one's pension. All these are going to be reflected also on our website, but I thank you very much for really agreeing on these 5 important commitments.
So before we give you a round of applause, I'm going to ask each of us on the panel if we agree with the 5 commitments to join the hands of the governors of the national central banks, and if there are NCAs represented at the highest level, to actually raise your hand if you're prepared to honor those 5 commitments. We have 3 years to deliver. Hands up for those who are willing. All right. Photos have been taken, whatever it takes.
Thank you.
Stefania, thank you very much, and to your team, bravo. Everybody, men and women, have a wonderful day, and tomorrow a wonderful Women's Day. Thank you.